Okay, so in this video, we're going to start by talking about variables and then talk about just the different or a few different data types that they can be stored as in Python. There are more data types. There's more to talk about. We're just going to talk about a few here. And then in the next video, we're going to look at Python to see how we can typecast in the programming language. But first, I just want to talk about the different types that you can store data as. So just as a brief little kind of like setup, and let me move the mouse out of the way so you don't get upset with me. I feel like we should be pretty confident in saying, hey, if I write a program that says x equals 5, what that does is somewhere in the computer, somewhere hidden inside somewhere in the computer, it's going to create a place on, some card, some memory card somewhere. The name of it is going to be X. And then it's going to say, hey, I'm going to make a little box inside of memory. And you can store something in here. And when we said X equals 5, which really means we're taking the value 5 and storing it in X, what we're going to do in that place in our computer that's named X inside of the box, it is holding on to the number 5. Now, we're going to talk about 3 different data types today. The 3 different data types that we're starting off with and that you usually start off with are string. And a string is just a collection of symbols. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. The next thing we're going to talk about is an integer. And that is a whole number value. And it can be positive or negative. I mean, that's just, the math definition of an integer. And I don't know if you're noticing, but my webcam is faster than my document camera. So you'll see things aren't really matching up. Like this is my right hand, and now I'm scratching myself, and the right hand's still there. Okay, sorry, distracting. And the last thing we're going to talk about today is a float, and that is a decimal number value. Decimal number value. Now, the thing that can be a little bit confusing about these different data types, about string, integer, and float, is, let's refocus this now that I zoomed in a little bit. Yeah, it's better. Is that you can store the same thing as different types. So this number 5 here, if this is how I typed it into Python, it is going to hold this as an integer by default. But you can store 5 as a string or as an integer or as a float. If I was going to store it as a string, it would store literally the symbol 5, but it would not hold the meaning that we usually think the symbol 5 means, right? The computer doesn't know if I'm storing it as a string, inside quotes, if I'm storing it as a string, it doesn't know that 5 means what we know 5 to mean, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It just knows, hey, here's this symbol. You're storing this symbol over here. If I was going to store it as an integer, well, that is the number 5. It is actually the value 5. It's not in quotes. It literally means 5 different things, right? So maybe I'll even write this out. I'm going to say, whoops, I meant to go that way. Where I'm going to say, like, just the symbol. Here, it actually means, like, the actual value 5. And, like, what is the difference between these two things? It's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but just think about, like, thousands of years ago before this symbol existed. right? And you had people that were trading things. They didn't have this symbol to show it, so you literally have to be like, how many different pencils do you want to trade me? Well, I'm going to trade you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different pencils. For a computer, that is what this is, right? In the purple, as an integer, it actually knows that this 5 means I'm talking about a value of 5 different things. This one over here is a string. Think of this as like the computer being back in a day and age when this symbol didn't mean anything, right? And it's just like, yeah, okay, you drew a squiggle on the paper. That's all I know. That's the difference between a string and an integer. The integer is actually holding on to, hey, I know this means you've got 5 different, things. This is just, hey, you told me to store a symbol. I'm storing that symbol. It doesn't care what the symbol is. It doesn't know what it means. And then finally, the only other thing is a float. And a float can hold the number 5, but it's always going to hold it as a decimal number. So it'll hold it as 5.0. So it's the actual value, the value, ... as a decimal. And so I hope that sort of makes sense. Now, something like 5, it can be stored as a string and as an integer and as a float. But if I said something like maybe I want to store the, so I'll put in quotes, the, right? This is a string. It's a couple symbols, the symbol capital T and then H and then E. A string very happily is like, I got you. I don't care. Just whatever. You want these symbols? Here, I'll hold on to these symbols. Great. Computer's happy to do that. If I try to store the as an integer, what does that even mean? An integer is supposed to be a whole number value. What number value can I put for this? It has no idea. It cannot do that. And same thing with a float. It can't hold on to the, right? So I hope that clears up the difference between these different data types. A string, it just, now my video is, okay, we're back. A string, it just holds on to the symbols. It doesn't care about the value. It's just saying, hey, you want me to hold on to 5? Sure, whatever. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that is. It's just this symbol. An integer can hold on to that value, and it actually knows that it means you're talking about 5 different things, but it could not hold on to a word because it doesn't know what does the mean as a number. And a float has the same issue holding on to the. Only difference between a float and a string is that a float can hold a decimal. So I could, maybe I have 5.5 pencils. I don't know. Does this count as half a pencil or is it a whole pencil? Maybe it's just a small one. Who knows? Anyways, floats can hold on to decimals. Yeah, I hope that's not confusing and maybe sort of helpful. And then we'll talk about typecasting and looking at it in code in the next video.